Our presenter is Nicole Moehring. Nicole has a table. You guys are on this floor, aren't you? Yeah, just around the corner. So brought some of the books that she's going to talk about today. Nicole and I have known each other for, I don't know how many years now. All right, a few. So unfortunately, brought together as a result of some of the things that she has experienced. But she's went on from that to write a book, Evan's Voice, that's very powerful, as well as some additional educational materials. So trainer, educator, author, and definitely a strong advocate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Willie, and thank you everyone for coming today. I appreciate you attending the session. No, we're going to talk about a lot of tough topics today. I just want to let you know that some of the slides I'm going through, they're available, I believe Willie said, online to download. I'm not going to go through everything because there's a lot of material to cover, but they are available online to download. And there is one slide in here. There's a video that unfortunately we can't download to show you, but again, you can view it online. Again, as Willie said, I'm Nicole Moehring. I'm the mother of Evan. And Evan's up there. Evan, I'm going to tell you our family story today. And the reason why I'm sharing our story is because there's not a lot of awareness about abuse with individuals with disabilities. I adopted Evan at age 5 weeks. Evan was neurotypical, so we thought, and later we discovered at 15 months old he had Fragile X syndrome and later diagnosed with autism. I don't know why I thought this, but I thought that with those diagnoses he would never be abused. Again, I have no idea why I thought this. Nobody ever said that to me. And I don't know about many of you in the room that are parents, but I never thought it would happen to my child. And I know a lot of you in here are service professionals and work with families. So if anything you can take away from today, if any of your families that you're working with, or you as a parent, if any child ever tells you that they've been abused, if there's one thing you can take away, please believe them. Children don't lie about this. So our story, I have 2 kids. My daughter's neurotypical. She's now 22. My son Evan is 19. All I ever told my kids, because again, nobody ever talks about it, I told them about body safety. And I talked about nobody should touch you where a bathing suit goes. Because when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, that's all we were told. And we were told nobody should give you candy, don't get in a car with a stranger. So those are the things I passed on to my kids. Conversations were a little bit different because my daughter's neurotypical. Evan, obviously, the conversation was scaled down, because his cognitive level is much different than my daughter's. So much to my surprise, on January 16th of 2016, Evan and I are just having our conversation back and forth of, Evan, nobody should touch you where a bathing suit goes. To which he says to me, what about an individual that we knew and trusted very well, someone close to the family? I'm sure you guys can all imagine, to my surprise, when he told me this, I just stopped dead in my spot. I'm gonna be honest. I thought I was gonna throw up. Time stood still. I didn't know what to do because nobody prepares you for this. Nobody tells you what to do. And again, in my head, this was never going to happen to my child. What he told me and what he disclosed in those moments were things no child would ever know unless they were done to him. I believe this was going on for probably 3 years, if not longer. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just going based on past things that had been said, his behaviors, how his behaviors changed. Then Evan tells me something else. He says, Mom, he told me, don't tell anyone or you'll be in big, big trouble. I just wanted to die. Does anyone in this room know how many children in the United States are over the age of 18? And this, when I say this, 2018 statistics. Anybody have a, anyone want to guess? Nobody? Anybody want to take a guess? 10 million? 74 million in 2018. Of the 74 million, how many of them had a disability? Anybody want to take a guess on that? 3 million. And of those 3 million, does anyone want to take a guess on how many were victims of abuse and neglect? I'm sorry? 2? 700,000. And of course, that number I think is skewed because of underreporting, which is sad. Because children aren't, there's not enough preventative education, as we all know. They don't know what to tell. They don't know if they're being touched inappropriately. The rate of violent victimization against victims with disabilities is 46.2 per 1,000. Think of that number for a minute. That's nearly 4 times the amount of a neurotypical individual. That's just mind-blowing. Every time I say that number, I still can't wrap my mind around that. The rate of violent crimes against individuals with disabilities is 17.9 per 1,000, which again is 4 times more the rate of an individual without a disability. Something's got to change. Nobody wants to talk about this. This is a global epidemic. And yet, people just keep sweeping it under the rug. People keep turning their heads. They don't want to believe kids like my Evan's best friend, Gillian. They don't want to believe them. They don't give them enough credit. They're human beings. Some of the reasons for violent victimization, why violent victimization is so high, their constant need for dependency on others. You know, I know Evan still to this day, he's 19, he'll be 20. He's constantly in need for somebody. You know, he'll never be able to live on his own. They're very vulnerable, so they're seen as weak. People don't give them enough credit. Lack of education. They don't know about boundaries. They don't know about consent. They don't know that they can say no. Marginalization, exclusion, and discrimination of individuals with disabilities. That doesn't go away. It should, but it doesn't. Group homes, isolation, and institutionalization. That's a big thing. Sometimes I feel like we keep going backwards and we need to go forwards. Poverty, lack of resources, lack of supports. We don't provide those enough to people to make them aware of how often these incidences occur. The United States Department of Justice reports as many as 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 5 boys will be sexually abused by the time they're 18. I mean, that's got to change. And it's even higher for kids with disabilities, individuals with disabilities. The Center of Disease Control estimates approximately 90% of child abuse are abused by someone they know and trust. And when you think about it, you know, my mindset always was only family is going to watch my kids ever. Little did I know it was going to be a family member that was going to abuse my son. I was mind blown when my son disclosed this. Mind blown. So my son's case, you know, he discloses, and we went through the proper channels. He went to the Child Advocacy Center. He went through the forensic interview. The interviewer was not trained to handle individuals with disabilities, which was no fault of her own. Just at that time in 2016, there just wasn't the proper forensic training at that point. So the case was unsubstantiated because she didn't know how to ask the right questions. And when she asked Evan, do you know the difference between the truth and a lie? Evan said no. He didn't know how to answer the question. So the case was unsubstantiated. So his perpetrator, nothing happened. He was still allowed to see his perpetrator with supervised visits. And in the letter from Child Services, it said that he wasn't allowed to co-bathe or co-sleep anymore with Evan. Imagine my fear. I couldn't do anything. As his mother, I had no power. I couldn't do anything except lose a lot of sleep, lose a lot of weight, didn't sleep, didn't eat, was sick to my stomach constantly because I couldn't protect my child as I wanted to because the law wasn't on my side. The law didn't want to protect my child as he needed me to advocate and protect him. So he kept going to see this gentleman. About a year later, and he would have a fit every time he'd go see him. It would be a constant battle, which then would put me in, you know, a state of horrible emotions, as I'm sure you can imagine. He'd come home from seeing him, we'd have to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure all of you are aware, any autistic child, you have to have structure, you have to have routine. Anything out of the sorts, you're just reinventing everything. This was horrible. So he's already dealing with trauma, and then you're going back, and now you're reinventing everything, trying to get him back in, you know, in some kind of a routine. And now I have just putting him back with the perpetrator. So probably about 10 to 12 months later, Evan starts having these horrible nightmares, but he also had meltdowns, unlike anything I had ever seen before. It wasn't your typical, I'm not getting the cookie after dinner. You know, I didn't get a toy at the toy store. They were definitely, I'm trying to tell you something, but I can't communicate. Something's going on. I started a log. I started journaling. I started telling, you know, I'm divorced from his father, and you know, remarried, and my husband and I were trying to figure out anything, Is it an article of clothing? Is it a TV show? Is it somebody he's with? Is it environmental? Was there something on TV? Anything. Is it music? Anything that we could possibly think of. What's the antecedent to these behaviors? And we can't come up with anything. We did this for months on end. So finally, June of 2018, I apologize. My daughter and my husband and my son and I were at a graduation party. And my daughter discloses that there was a 19-year-old that had sexually assaulted her. Different perpetrator. I reported it right away. My daughter's neurotypical, as I mentioned earlier. The system looked totally different for my daughter. They treated her differently. There was not a question in anyone's mind that this happened to her. She got justice. He's on the registry for 15 years. He served jail time. He got a mental health assessment. It was clear they believed her. And I've been asked repeatedly, do I think it's because he's a boy, she's a girl? Not at all. He had a disability. He was discriminated against, which is wrong. That case should have been looked at exactly the same way, through the same eyes, and it wasn't. And that has to change. Individuals with disabilities deserve the same rights, the same attention. Their voices need to be heard, just like my daughter's was. So all while this is going on, my son discloses that not only was his perpetrator molesting him, he was making him undress, pose. His picture was being taken, and they were put on the internet. I was mortified. I thought for sure we got him. Same perpetrator, by the way. Both kids had different perpetrators, but my son's perpetrator was the same in both cases. Went through the whole process again, went through Child Advocacy Center. This time it's substantiated. And 30 days later, I get a letter in the mail saying that, the alleged perpetrator, Evan didn't have to see him anymore, but they sent a letter to him and saying that it was substantiated. Basically, that there was nothing they can do. I fought this. It was in a different county than we're in. We're in Medina County. It was in a different county, so they had to send it to that jurisdiction. That was in August of 2018. I fought it until April of 19 to get a search warrant executed. By April of 19, the alleged perpetrator had gotten new equipment and hired a criminal attorney. So when the search warrant was executed, nothing was found. And I believe it's because that letter was generated, which they did their jobs. They did nothing wrong. They absolutely did nothing wrong. But that letter should never be generated to let these guys know, hey, you're being named a criminal. In the meantime, my son had to go through a third forensic interview just to get that search warrant executed. And this time it was by a forensic interviewer that was trained. I'll come back to these slides. I just want to show you. It wasn't until the third interview that Evan was asked to draw a picture. And this was the picture that Evan drew. He drew a picture of the perpetrator and him in bed. It took 3 interviews. That should have been on the first interview, because 3 interviews, that inflicted more trauma in Evan's life. He was already dealing with PTSD, anxiety, severe meltdowns. This was on the 3rd interview. In addition, They asked him where he was touched, and this is what he drew. That was the third interview. So I talk about how they failed him. Well, they failed him by giving him 3 interviews, not giving him that first chance in the first interview, not believing him. They should have never let, no child, not just a child with a disability, but no child should ever be put through 3 interviews. I mean, that was ludicrous. I mean, I feel without a doubt he was discriminated against. Because they let him continue to see the perpetrator. They didn't give him a chance. They didn't let his voice be heard. Because he has a disability, they didn't care. They negated his feelings. They blew him off. They blew me off. And believe me, I was on that call with the prosecutor continuously. He probably had caller ID and got sick of seeing my number, and I didn't care because I'm his advocate. I didn't think, and I don't think, that law enforcement is equipped to handle these cases. And I don't think they put enough attention on these cases as they should be. I think they're too hard to prosecute, and therefore they just write them off. And that's not fair. They're not getting the justice they deserve. So the effects that, excuse me, the effects that we've seen since 2016, Evan is still going through extensive therapy with a trauma-informed therapist. Trying to find a trauma-informed therapist, I can't even tell you how excruciating that was. That deals with sexual abuse and an individual with disabilities. It is not an easy task. We fortunately were blessed to have found someone who is exceptional. And Evan sees him either once or twice a week, depending. And I say depending because he has highs and lows. Right now, we're in a really bad time. His anxiety levels, the PTSD, he doesn't want to leave home. He's afraid the perpetrator is going to come and get him still. And this is almost 10 years later that he first disclosed. It's horrible. The nightmares he has, separation anxiety from me, and the list goes on. This is such a real thing, what trauma does. Trauma is bad enough on individuals like us, but when you add that component of being an individual with a disability, it just escalates it so much more. Now I'm going to show you, and if I have probably a 40-second video, and if this is going to trigger anyone, I just want to let you know ahead of time. But this is one of the meltdowns Evan had early on. This was probably maybe 6 years ago. And this is just one example of the things we've had to deal with. Is it gonna play? We never know what's going to trigger him. Like I said earlier, we have no idea. Things just can come out of nowhere. And you can tell when he starts one of his, I call them episodes, You can see it in his eyes. It's not, like when my daughter was little and she had, one of her terrible two tantrums, totally different. You can see that it's the PTSD, it's the fear, it's repressed memories at this point, all these years later. People will say, oh, he needs to get over it. You don't get over this. You just don't get over this. When you were molested for years, when you had pictures taken against your will, asking you to undress, him watching his perpetrator put them on the internet. I don't know where those pictures are now. And that's so, for me as a mother, I can't even put into words. And to know that this person is still walking out there. And so I can't imagine what goes through his mind when I know what goes through my mind. And I just have to try and be calm. And we have coping mechanisms. And he'll now say, I need Evan time, which took us all these years to get to. A lot of therapy, a lot of family therapy, a lot of therapy for him. So I encourage all of you when you're working with families and, if any of your families say, I think my child could have been a victim of abuse, please take action. Because the repercussions of these individuals being abused, it doesn't go away. It's a lifetime. Our whole lives were turned upside down. It's never going to change. All we can do is change with it. This affects the entire family. My husband and I did take crisis intervention. Well, that worked for a while when Evan was my height. Evan is now 6'1". So it's a little bit different now. Luckily, Evan's episodes, as I call them, aren't nearly what they were there. We've worked out of him. He can do talk therapy now. He does cognitive behavior therapy. So his episodes look a lot different. But that doesn't mean they're not there. We just know how to manage them differently. He still has, moments where he talks about things. We're not encouraged to talk about them with him, but if he brings it up, we definitely, we do talk about him, but we let him bring it up because I never want to be thought-provoking for him to bring up any kind of memory that he's had of what those experiences were for him at all. The CPI training was good. We wanted to make sure he protected himself, or we wanted to make sure we protected him, that we protected our daughter, and that we protected my husband and I. So we removed all glass from the house. You saw how he was just picking up anything in arm's length and throwing things. So it was a long time that we had no picture frames out. We had nothing on the walls because he just walked through like the Tasmanian devil. And he just took anything out, threw things. He didn't know what he was doing. I'd have family members say, oh, control him. You can't control the situations. You just can't. It's impossible. And then the other thing is trusting at this point. I didn't trust people before with him. Now I certainly don't trust people. Because when somebody hurts your child, trust is gone forever. And that's very hard because now trying to leave him with anyone, it puts a huge strain on our lives now. It really does. So going through all this, we get to the point where the behaviors were so extreme. They weren't affecting his daily life at school. He was getting through school really well until he wasn't. At the end of the school year, kind of knew things were going to start having a turn. And all of a sudden, at the beginning of the next school year, we had an emergency IEP meeting to which we were told that he was going to be removed from school and put into a behavior school. Everything went good for the first year. It's the honeymoon stage, as I referred to it as. And then I got a phone call one day from the building administrator, basically just telling me that there was a little incident, and Evan was hurt by another student. Didn't need to come pick him up, but just wanted to give you the heads up when you get the pink slip in his folder when he comes home today. I said, send me the pictures. That was the little incident. That was the little incident. So now not only has he been molested and had pictures taken of him and dealt with all that trauma, and now he's got this. Well, let me tell you, within 10 minutes, I don't think there could have been a cop that tried to pull me over. That 20-minute ride lasted 10 minutes. And that's what it ended up looking like. He had multiple contusions. I pulled him out of that school immediately. So what had happened was they had plastic hockey sticks. I don't know what school with special needs kids gives plastic hockey sticks, but they did. And I think in defense for the child, because I will, to this day, do not blame the child, and here's why, because I think he had a trauma background just like Evan. And from what I understand, because kids don't lie, Evan said the teacher was on Facebook on his phone not paying attention. And I think what happened was Evan went to hit the hockey puck, and the kid got scared and belted him. I think that's what happened. So I tried explaining to Evan that, even though Evan was scared, I said, Evan, it's not this little boy's fault. That was hard for me as my child sitting there hurt this bad. But it really wasn't this child's fault. I blame the teacher. I couldn't send my child back to that school with good intentions, obviously. He'd already been traumatized. Every time he walked in that gymnasium, he was going to have more PTSD. So in addition to the trauma, the PTSD, and the anxiety he's already experiencing, now it just heightened even more. He did not know how to process what he had been through. He honestly did not know how to process. He had already been dealing with enough. We'd been dealing with enough as a family. This poor kid has been through so much. So we went back to the psychologist to work through this, to explain, try and explain to him what was going on, how we can help him through this now. And then this started. This is his bedroom. This is how he dealt with it. Because he had so much anger inside of him. Because he did not know what to do. He didn't know how to cope. He didn't know how to process. And I thought, you know what? If this is what he has to do, then let him do it. So there's stuff on the floor. And this is, by the way, this is so unlike Evan. Evan is my OCD child, unlike his sister. Evan is me to a T, and this is not Evan. And this is how Evan's world was. And it was okay, because this was his coping mechanism, because he didn't know what to do. And that's the one point I want to make is like the behaviors that they have, they don't know how to process this. They don't know how to process the abuse, what they're feeling, all these different thoughts and emotions in their head. I didn't know how to process a lot of this. Who does? You don't unless you're going through it. And I'm trying to process my own thoughts and my own emotions and dealing with the outside world and all these different opinions everybody has. And until you walk the walk, you don't know what to do. Thank goodness you don't know what to do. And then on top of it, I'm trying to help him. My husband's trying to help him. My daughter's trying to help him. And then this is what he was doing at school. The teachers loved us. But they understood because they dealt with kids like this. They dealt with situations like this. They were very caring. So they understood. But this was happening on probably, I'd say twice a week at least. And he would just start at one end of the classroom and just blow through it. And there was nothing we can do because you couldn't reason with him. You just couldn't reason with him. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with repressed memories, but that's what we've been dealing with a lot. You know, he has these memories that'll just pop up out of nowhere of different little bits and pieces of things that'll happen. He'll hear a song and it takes him back. He'll hear a commercial. He'll see a TV show or a theme song from a TV show even, and he'll say different things about that time. And it's mind-blowing, the specifics he remembers. And you just have to let him talk through it because he's letting it out. And you don't know when it's going to happen. You have no idea when it's going to happen. Some of the things we've dealt with, anxiety, feeling uncomfortable in certain places. There's certain restaurants he won't go to, and I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. And then it started to make sense to me why. But it's places he'd go with the perpetrator. And then it was like, okay, now I get it. And we just won't go there. Attachment issues. Like with me, a lot of attachment. Extreme emotions. I mean, he can go from being easy keel to all of a sudden, he's just like off the charts, and you're like, what did I miss? But it's whatever's going on inside his head. And he can't communicate it. He just expresses it through emotions. I at one point had him tested for bipolar disorder because I thought maybe this is something like a bipolar because that's what it looked like. But it wasn't. It's definitely from the PTSD and the anxiety. Difficult managing any kind of stress. He just does not know how to do that. He can't. He just can't. He has spells of constant fatigue. And that comes and goes, depending on, how severe the PTSD gets. The behaviors, as I've talked about, conduct disorder, where obviously you've seen those pictures of how he's gone through the classroom, gone through his bedroom. The behaviors where the actions, with the extreme behaviors, and those vary too. We can go months without seeing anything, and then all of a sudden we have, incident after incident. Or if it's full moon, I don't know what it is with the full moon, but everything seems to manifest during a full moon. Any kind of planning, organizing, anything like that, like he just can't function in those ways. Not that he could before, because he's lower cognitive functioning, but it just seems like he can't do a lot of those things like he did before. Health issues that you could see, and I'm not saying we see all these, but I'm just for an FYI, intermittent explosive disorder, sudden outbursts, things of that nature. Internalizing symptoms where they're not going to talk about it, so things escalate, eventually because of that. Inattention. Extreme learning disabilities, that can be another thing, or memory problems, the PTSD, peer rejection, problem with friends, more so than normal. Trusting people, huge. My son's trust for people is about this big. There's maybe 6 people that he trusts, maybe. Becoming hypersexual. problems with self-control, self-esteem. And again, these are all things that are going to vary depending on the individual. Self-harm, physical harm. And again, that's something like we've never seen that, but that can happen. Establishing boundaries is a big thing. You know, a lot of autistic individuals don't have boundaries or they don't know boundaries. You know, Evan, I think with me anyways, he's a little too clingy. Like he wants to just cling on because I think it's that attachment. You know, he's just always like, you know, wants to hug me, which I just take that because, you know, I want him to feel safe and secure, you know, and I love that hug, you know. So how do we prevent abuse? You know, talking about it, not hiding it, not being ashamed, or not having, if someone was abused, not being ashamed to talk about it. I'm a survivor of abuse from my first marriage, and I know it was very hard for me to first talk about it, but you can't hide it, and that's something that I think a lot of people do, and it's everybody's story. If some people don't want to talk about it, I understand that. But the more people talk about it, the more we know it's okay. The more people then will open up about it and be able to get help, because that's huge. Getting help is key. Parents aren't aware. I wish someone would have said to me, I adopted Evan at 5 weeks old. I adopted him, he was neurotypical. It wasn't until he was 4 months old that I started noticing something was wrong. And he was diagnosed at 14 months old with Fragile X syndrome. I wish a doctor would have said to me, now he's, you know, whatever the percentage would have been at that time, now he is, you know, 2.9 times more likely to be a victim of abuse. No one told me that. Because that, at that point in time, you're looking for providers, you're looking for people to help you take care of, you know, more care with your children. Nobody ever told me that. And while those statistics are hard to hear, there's no denying that. Nobody tells you these things. Nobody. So I encourage everyone to start having these tough love conversations. Because if we don't, those statistics are just going to continue. This is a global epidemic. Preventative education. We have coming out in the next couple weeks, we have Evan and Gillian Says. They're available for pre-sale today. These have been in the works for about 3 years now. They are body safety books for kids with disabilities. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into these books, so they were just right for individuals with moderate to intense disabilities, so they can know what the preventative methods are for body safety, for knowing what to do if someone touches you, for knowing who to go tell. There's an educator or a parent guide in the back. Very proud of these books. I thought they would be available for today, and unfortunately, we don't have them here today. There's nothing like this out there. We need to start having these conversations, and it can't be a one and done. We have to have these conversations. We have to ask questions to these kids or adults. I mean, it doesn't just need to be a child that we're talking to, but we have to start having conversations, because they're not going to know otherwise. They don't know. How are they going to know unless we're educating them? You know, they're not going to know what consent is. They don't know what boundaries are. You know, Evan didn't know. Evan knew nobody should touch you where a bathing suit goes. If I wouldn't have had that conversation with him, he wouldn't have known to tell me. And that's all I knew to tell him. And I'm ashamed of that. But nobody told me otherwise. Nobody ever said, hey, you need to have this conversation with him. And I wish somebody would have had that conversation with me. You have to teach proper body part names. That's huge. So many people I hear, call it this, call it that. No, you have to teach proper body part names. Because if a child would ever be sexually abused, they're going to know to say, oh, Uncle Joe touched my vagina. Otherwise, they're not going to know what to come and tell you. Encourage your parents to start having these conversations from an early age. It's never too young. We intended when we constructed these books are for, any age. We made sure that the wording in these books, it's for any age. The print's big enough. We wanted to make sure that they'd understand because there's nothing out there available. The characters we made relatable to individuals with disabilities. We have a character that's in a wheelchair. We have characters with walkers. We wanted individuals to open up the books and go, oh, that looks like me. That's why it took so long. We put so much thought behind these books. We contacted experts, psychologists, psychiatrists, so we knew exactly how to make these the best. We have questions in there, so if a child gets to a page or an individual gets to a page and you say, oh, has anybody ever touched you? And if they say something, you can report it, or the parent knows they can report it. And hopefully these are going to open up conversations. Maybe it'll get more reporting. We don't want more reporting. But if a child's been touched inappropriately, at least then they'll know what to do. Encourage families to ask their school districts what protocols are in place. For anything. What happens if a staff member abuses a child? Just like, if there's a mass shooting, things like that. Those things should be encouraged to ask. What safeguards? Any parent should know what should be in place. And I'm finding that some districts don't necessarily have these things in place, which is really unfortunate. And any parent, if there's a child with a disability and there's a speech therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist working with the child, they should have the right to know what's going on. They should have an open door policy. Schools should let individual parents walk in, have an open door policy. I know where we were at, we didn't have an open door policy, and that made me uncomfortable. So I should have been able to walk into that classroom at any single time to know what was going on with my son. And I never liked that. So how else can we reduce the risk? Knowing and monitoring the signs of abuse, spreading awareness, providing preventative education and intervention, building trust with your clients, empowering individuals to make their own choices. That's one of the goals of our books too, is to empower them and teaching them what empowerment is. Listening to them. Even if they're nonverbal, you can still listen to them. They have a way of communicating. Allowing individuals to ask questions, answering them with honesty. And never judge or make assumption. Discussing the importance of reporting suspected abuse. My philosophy always is I would rather report it and it not be true than not report it and the child continue to be abused. And the preventative education, just have it continue. It's not a one and done. Our books are not meant to be read it once and put it on the shelf. We want these books out. Kids with disabilities, we all know it's repetitive learning. You know, we got to keep reading it. We got to keep letting them know. Otherwise, they're going to forget. They're not going to remember what boundaries are, what consent is, unless you keep going back and repeating everything that you're trying to teach them. So it's just drilled into their head. If you feel something's wrong with a family or their child or the individual that you're working with, keep following up with them. Have a list of referrals for the individuals, such as psychologists, psychiatrists, because like I said before, trying to find a psychologist for my son was one of the biggest hurdles that I had to walk over. It was so difficult. When I finally found one, it was great. But that was one of the biggest hurdles for me. I have on this slide and then the next slide, and you guys it's on the slides for you when you download this, but these are just some key areas that would be areas that wouldn't be typical of an individual if they were hurt just, playing on the playground or something like that. These would be areas where if they were physically hurt, and that's Evan from one of our books. Well, Evan is one of the characters in our books, and so that's him up there demonstrating. And then that's Hannah, another character from our books. Possible medical signs for any kind of sexual abuse is any kind of bloody or bodily fluids in the underwear. Now, again, it doesn't mean that they were sexually abused, but it could be a sign. Frequent urinary tract infections, too, is another sign. So out of all the trauma with Evan being abused, my daughter and I founded Voices of Change in 2018, and it was kind of her idea, actually, because she just felt that it was not fair that she received justice and her brother didn't, and we really started it out just to create awareness about abuse of individuals with disabilities. We wanted to make sure people knew that, this is a global problem, and really put emphasis on all the issues that are going on and what people can do. As I spoke about before, Evan and Gillian says they will be out this month. The QR code is to our website. You can buy them on our website. They will be available on Amazon as well. And we do have them available for pre-order at our table today. And Evan's voice, which I wrote about Evan's whole story. So you got the condensed version today, but this goes into more detail of the entire story and everything that we went through. That's available today too for purchase if anyone would like to purchase it. And there's the QR code if anyone would like to follow us on our social media platforms. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Give me a
Thank you. Not really a question, more of a comment to say thank you for being willing to speak up and not only share his story, but also highlight things that are happening to persons that aren't able to speak up for themselves. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I know you're a personal champion. And it's just something that I think we all should just be aware of. So thank you for shining a light on it.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I would like to also thank you for sharing your story. It was stories like yours and others that prompted us to, I work for Cuyahoga County, to reach out to a virtual reality company that we work with to create modules to help people with developmental disabilities recognize when they're being groomed as a proactive measure. So the company that we're working with is, the CEO is a father of a young man on the spectrum. So there's, we have a shared interest in getting stuff like this out here. It doesn't address every situation, but we're super excited about it, and those should be ready sometime this year. So one step in the right direction, I think. And I'm so excited about your books. They're amazing, and I can't wait to get my hands on some of them.
Oh, excellent. That's fantastic.
hang around.
Thank you for sharing that.
Any other questions? So one of the things, and I don't even know if Nicole knows yet, so we were brought together by Dr. Nora Baladarian, and Nora has focused in this area for decades, one of the pioneers. And she developed the last national survey around abuse in 2012. And she has now, just got the email this week, is ready to put out a new survey, I believe working with Stanford and Arizona State. So it's going to be a nationwide survey, and we will be sharing that with folks within this room, all right? So we will be getting that out. I'm going to have to make sure Nicole gets that. So please look at that. It's also going to be, it's in English, Spanish, and working with being in American Sign Language. So it's going to be a new step forward to help us look at what is going on. So hopefully you'll all be able to participate in sharing that, completing it from your own experience, as well as sharing it with families. So look forward to that coming out.
Excellent.
All right, anything else? Remember, nurses, check in with Susan. Those folks online, I don't know if you need to do it, but just go ahead, put your email in the chat box again, and your county boards, we can get your nursing credits. And I hope you're all back for the HRC committee meeting coming up next. How to do well in accreditation.